My name is Olivia Hayes, and if you told me years ago that I'd be sitting here, on the top floor of a glass tower that I own, I would have laughed. Not because I didn't believe in myself, but because they never did. I leaned back in my leather chair, the soft rustle of my silk blouse brushing against it, and glanced out over the city. The streets glitter with headlights, each car rushing toward something or someone. I remember when I used to rush too, desperate for a place at someone else's table. Desperate for an invitation, for approval. But things change. The phone on my desk buzzes, pulling me back. I glance at the screen, and my lips curve into something between a smile and a smirk. The names lighting up my phone are the same people who once rolled their eyes when I asked them to be part of my life. The same people who dismissed me like I was nothing more than background noise.
Now?
They're here in my lobby, asking to see me. My assistant's voice comes through the intercom. "Miss Hayes, they say it's urgent. Should I let them in?" I pause, pressing the cool edge of my wine glass against my lips. The irony isn't lost on me. They refused my invite once. And now, they can't take a single step forward unless I allow it. And maybe, just maybe, I'm not ready to let them. I wasn't always Olivia Hayes, the woman people whisper about with respect, or envy. Once, I was just Olivia, the girl with big dreams and small means, who thought family would be her first cheering squad. I remember it vividly. My 21st birthday. I had saved for months, working double shifts at a coffee shop just to afford a small dinner at a cozy restaurant downtown. I wanted my parents, my brother, and even my cousin Rachel there. I thought if they could just see me stepping into adulthood, maybe they'd finally believe in me. I called, texted, even hand-wrote invitations. The night came. I wore a pale blue dress I bought from a thrift store and spent an hour ironing out every wrinkle. My hands trembled as I fixed my hair in the mirror, whispering, "This is the night they'll see me." But when I arrived at the restaurant, the table for 6 stayed set for 1. The waiter kept refilling my water, offering me soft smiles that cut deeper than silence. I called home. No answer. I called Rachel. Straight to voicemail. By the 3rd hour, my makeup had smudged from holding back tears. When I finally walked out, heels clicking against the sidewalk, the lump in my throat was unbearable. They hadn't just missed dinner. They'd refused my invitation to my life. That night, I went to my grandmother's house. She was the only one who ever truly saw me. She wrapped me in her faded quilt and pressed something into my hand, a silver keychain shaped like a compass. "You don't need their directions, Olivia," she whispered. "Find your own way. Even when you're lost, this will remind you. You can guide yourself." I held that compass so tightly it left an imprint in my palm. That was the night I stopped waiting for their approval. The next morning, while the pain still sat heavy in my chest, I made a decision. If they wouldn't step into my world, I'd build one so strong, so undeniable, that one day they'd be the ones knocking on my door. And I'd decide whether to open it. The morning after my birthday, I tucked the silver compass into my bag and never left home without it. It was my quiet reminder that I didn't need anyone to chart my course for me. At first, success was nothing but long nights, instant coffee, and self-doubt that felt louder than any alarm clock. I worked mornings at the cafe, afternoons tutoring kids in math, and nights sketching out business plans on napkins and scrap paper. I wasn't sure what I was building yet, but I knew I had to start. People laughed when I said I wanted to create something of my own. "Olivia, you're not cut out for that," my brother once told me. "You don't have the brains or the money." His words stung, but they also lit a fire. One evening, exhausted from another shift, I stayed late at the cafe to clean. That's when I met Margaret Cole, a woman with streaks of silver in her hair and an aura of quiet power. She was a regular, always ordering black coffee, always tipping generously. That night, she lingered after closing, watching me scrub the counters. "You work harder than most people half your age," she said, setting down her empty mug. "Tell me, what do you really want?" The question cracked something open in me. Words spilled out. My dream of creating a consulting firm that helps small businesses, my obsession with strategy, my belief that even the overlooked could win if given the right tools. Instead of laughing, Margaret leaned forward. Then stop just surviving. Start building. She became my mentor, teaching me the language of contracts, clients, and capital. She opened doors I didn't even know existed, but only after making me prove I was ready. She never handed me anything easily. Earn it, Olivia, she'd say. And I did. The years that followed were brutal. There were nights I slept on the office floor I could barely afford. Days I thought about quitting when rejection emails piled higher than bills. I ate ramen noodles, so often I joked about starting a cookbook called 1,000 Ways to Boil Water. But then came the turning point. My first real client, a family-run bakery on the verge of closing. I poured everything I had into saving them, rebranding, cost-cutting, outreach. When their profits tripled in 6 months, word spread. Another client came, then another. Soon, the girl who once sat alone at a table for 6 was signing contracts with companies that once wouldn't have let her through the front door. Still, I kept it quiet. On social media, I posted modest updates, nothing flashy, just vague smiles and city skylines. When my family asked how I was doing, I brushed it off with, "I'm managing." I didn't need their congratulations, and I wasn't ready for their curiosity. Behind the curtain, though, my life was changing. Late nights turned into early wins. My first profitable year turned into 5. My rented office turned into an entire floor. And through it all, the compass stayed in my bag, its edges worn smooth, its weight a constant reminder. I wasn't lost anymore. I was building a world. Quietly, patiently, relentlessly. And I knew someday they'd see it. The elevator doors opened with a muted chime, and I could see their reflection in the glass wall of my office before I even turned around. My parents, my brother Daniel, and my cousin Rachel, dressed in familiar tones of judgment and discomfort. It had been years since we'd been in the same room, but the air between us still carried the weight of all the times they'd refused me. I rose slowly, smoothing down the front of my tailored navy dress. "Please come in," I said, my voice calm even. My assistant closed the door behind them, leaving us in the quiet hum of the office. Their eyes darted everywhere: the marble floor, the panoramic city view, the modern art on the walls. Rachel's gaze lingered on the oversized photograph of a bakery opening, the ribbon-cutting ceremony with me holding the scissors. She blinked, almost as if she couldn't reconcile the girl she once ignored with the woman in the frame. My father cleared his throat. "Olivia, this is impressive." His tone was hesitant, the way someone speaks when they're not sure if they're allowed to be impressed. Daniel stuffed his hands into his pockets. "So, this is yours?" I nodded, gesturing around the room. "All of it. And the 5 floors below, plus the partners I work with across 3 states. Hayes Consulting isn't just a name on the door. It's mine." Silence stretched, heavy and awkward. I walked back to my desk, the click of my heels echoing. "It's funny," I said, resting my hand on the polished wood. "How different things look from here. Do you remember my 21st birthday? The invitations I sent?" My mother's face paled. She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with her wedding ring. I leaned forward slightly. "You refused me then. All of you. And now you're standing here, waiting for my approval to enter." Rachel shifted uncomfortably. "Olivia, we didn't realize. We didn't know what you were capable of." A short, humorless laugh escaped me. "You didn't want to know. That's the difference." They sat across from me, 3 pairs of eyes studying the office, the success, the life they had no part in building. For a moment, I let the silence hang. I wanted them to feel it, the weight of years they had dismissed me, contrasted with the undeniable reality surrounding them now. Finally, Daniel broke it. "We need your help." His words were clipped, reluctant. Of course they did. That was why they were here. My father's business was failing. Rachel's marriage was crumbling. Daniel had debts he couldn't pay. I knew because people talk, and success has a way of making information find you. I tilted my head, letting their words settle in the air. "You need me." "Yes," my father admitted, his voice cracking with a humility I'd never heard before. I leaned back in my chair, crossing one leg over the other. "Do you see the irony? Years ago, I begged for you to sit at my table. And now, you can't sit at yours without me. The city skyline stretched out behind me like a crown, a silent witness to the shift of power in the room. And in that moment, I wasn't the girl with a thrift store dress and trembling hands anymore. I was Olivia Hayes, self-made, unshaken, and holding the key to doors they could no longer open without me. I let the silence stretch a little longer, savoring the irony. For years, I had craved their approval like oxygen. Now, they sat in front of me, breathless, waiting for mine. Finally, I folded my hands together on the desk. If you came here expecting a blank check or a rescue without strings, you should leave now. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Olivia, come on, we're family. I tilted my head. Were we family when you told me I wasn't smart enough to make it? When you laughed at my ideas? When you left me sitting alone on my birthday? My voice didn't rise. I didn't need it to. The quiet firmness was enough to make his cheeks burn. Rachel spoke next, her tone softer. We were wrong. I was wrong. I didn't think you'd ever, that you'd get this far. That's the point, I said, standing and walking slowly toward the window. The city lights shimmered like tiny truths beneath us. You couldn't imagine my success because you were too busy defining me by your own limits. I turned back to face them. But I'll make you a deal. I'll help, but only if you agree to my terms. No excuses. No half measures. My father's brows furrowed. What kind of terms? I walked back, meeting each of their eyes. Daniel, you've been coasting your whole life, living off favors and shortcuts. If you want my support, you go back to school. Learn something real. Work for it. His mouth opened, ready to protest, but my look silenced him. Rachel, I continued, you've built your life around appearances, marrying for money, staying silent when it hurt you. My condition for you is simple. Stop living for show. Pursue what you actually want. And until you do, don't expect me to bankroll your lies. Her eyes welled up, but she nodded faintly, as if part of her had been waiting to hear those words. Then I turned to my father. Dad, you taught me early on that approval was conditional, that I had to earn every scrap of acknowledgement. But here's my condition for you. Humility. If I step in to save your business, you don't just take the money and walk away. You stand beside me, admit to your employees that I'm the one keeping the doors open, and you treat every worker with the respect you never gave me. His jaw tightened, pride warring with necessity. For the first time in my life, he didn't have the upper hand. I leaned against the edge of my desk, crossing my arms. These are my terms. Not 1 inch less. If you agree, I'll help. If not, the door is right there. Silence followed. The kind that presses against your chest and steals your breath. Finally, my father spoke, his voice low. We'll do it. I nodded once, calm and steady. Good. Because from now on, you don't just enter my office, or my business, or my world, without my permission. You enter on my terms. The following weeks felt like watching a tide finally turn. Daniel enrolled in community college. At first, I thought he'd quit after the first exam, but he surprised me, sending me photos of his textbooks, late-night study sessions, even a sheepish selfie from the library. It wasn't about proving anything to me anymore. It was about proving something to himself. Rachel called one evening, her voice unsteady but clear. I filed for divorce, Olivia. For once, I chose myself. There was no bitterness, no theatrics, just relief. She sounded lighter, like someone finally setting down a weight they'd carried too long. And my father, the proudest man I'd ever known, stood beside me at his company, introducing me not as his daughter, but as the partner who saved us. Watching him shake the hands of employees he once overlooked, I realized he was learning humility in a way that years of life had never taught him. I never expected perfection from them. I didn't need their apologies to be flowery or their efforts flawless. What mattered was that, for the first time, they were willing to grow. One night, long after the office had emptied, I sat alone at my desk. The city glittered outside, 1,000 windows glowing like stars. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the compass my grandmother had given me. Its silver edges were worn smooth now, but when I held it, I felt the same weight, the same quiet strength she'd passed on. Her words echoed in my mind. You don't need their directions, Olivia. Find your own way. And I had. I thought of the girl in the thrift store dress, staring at an empty table for six. She would never have believed this moment was possible. But she had endured, and she had built, and she had arrived. I placed the compass back in my bag, where it had always belonged. Not because I was lost anymore, but because it reminded me of who I had been, and the journey it took to become who I am. Standing at the window, I let the glass cool against my fingertips as the city pulsed below. They once refused my invite, I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. Now they wait for my approval to enter. And that approval? It's mine to give or not. The words settled into the quiet, sharp and certain, like the closing line of a story only I could have written. And this time, I wasn't just invited. I owned the whole room.